Content trigger warning. This recording includes some discussion of mental health crisis and suicide that may be distressing or triggering to some members of our audience. We wanted to remind our audience that if you are having any thoughts of harming yourself, to call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis line at 988. The Lifeline provides 24-hour confidential support to anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. This week, we welcome Movva, CEO and founder at Securin, to discuss how to combat the CISO mental health crisis. In the Leadership and Communication segment, Managing Cybersecurity Stress, a deep dive into the 93% CISO burnout rate, how to win at cyber by influencing people, boost your team's productivity by hiring force multipliers, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Your customers' and employees' identities are your responsibility to keep safe. But who is helping you stay safe from identity-based threats? Identity is the key to getting security right. And with the right identity partner, so much more is possible for your business than you thought. From strengthening cybersecurity, to increasing revenue, to reducing inefficiencies and costs, Okta unlocks growth and new possibilities for its customers. Go to securityweekly.com/Okta to learn more about Okta and the company's commitment to leading the fight against identity attacks. Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide: cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSaint's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersaint. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The Level Blue Futures Report 2024 sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business context that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today by visiting securityweekly.com/Level Blue. Cybersecurity simplified. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 372, recorded November 11th, 2024. Happy Veterans Day, and thank you for your service. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. Both of my normal co-hosts are off this week because it's Veterans Day, so I have beautiful fill-ins today. So joining remotely are my 2 co-hosts today. First, Mr. Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, it's been a long time, buddy.
It has. I got to babysit the show for you a couple episodes ago, and that's always fun. I love chatting with Jason Albuquerque, and I have to apologize to him every time because I can't make football small talk at all.
It's all right. Nor can Ben, by the way. So it's just he and I, usually every Monday. But you were, 2 weeks ago, I was moving back into the house. So thank you for stepping in. Also joining, who I have not seen in a very long time, Mr. Josh Marpet. Josh, how are you?
I'm great. It's always good to be on your show, Matt. Really, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the hell out of it.
I love when you come on to the Security Money show because, anyways, it's coming up in December, so maybe I might need to fill in. You never know. Just saying. Ram is the chairman and chief executive officer at Securin Inc. Through his visionary approach and strategic decision-making, he has played a crucial role in establishing Securin as a reputable and pioneering figure in the cybersecurity domain. With a wealth of experience spanning more than 2 decades, Ram co founded Cybersecurity Works and RiskSense and held prominent positions at Tibco Software. Ram's passion for philanthropy is evident through his active support of community impacting initiatives. Ram, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Joshua. This is an honor to be on your show, and I've heard a lot, and I've seen a couple of your shows before. Thank you.
Yes. Well, this is a very interesting topic. It's a very important topic around mental health, not only for the CISO. I think we'll talk a little bit about security teams. And, this is something we've covered on articles. There's one of the articles we're covering today actually talks about this topic. So, something we've talked a lot about, primarily because of the stressors. The CISO role is a little unique with some of the stressors that it has, which creates potential for some burnout and mental health issues. So, Ram, why don't we start with why is the CISO role so stressful?
Most of the people think that CISO's role is not so stressful. It is very stressful, and a lot of people also think that it's stressful when there's a breach and they have to react and they have to bring things back up. But even before a breach, a CISO is someone who has to work with very limited. All CISOs will agree, from a resource, money, and everything. And they'll also have to be prepared for all kinds of audits, and they have to take care of their employees' mental health. So even before something bad happens, they have a lot more going on their day in life when they go to work. So that's why even pre and post, it's always stressful, and they're always under the watch of the CIOs or the board or the C-level executives of an organization.
Yeah, when I think about the broadening scope of the CISO role, right? They wear a lot of different hats, which creates some of those stresses, and they don't necessarily have the same support that others do. So think about a CFO and the finance side, for example. They have a ton of financial analysts. They have their financial planning folks. How many CISOs actually have a staff of some of those, like to help with just kind of the day to day business running of the house? And so if you don't have those, guess what? Falls to the CISO. If you were lucky to have a deputy CISO, maybe, but I don't think most do.
You're absolutely right. Even if you pick the Fortune 100, they too have less resources. They have few deputies, and the scope is a lot bigger. They might have decent sized teams, but their scope is much bigger on the Fortune 100. And you come to the mid-size, they virtually have no resources. They'll have to rely on partners. They'll have to rely on consultants, virtual CISOs sometimes. And this market is just beginning. If you look at the world or the United States, out of the 50 states, only maybe a third of the states have adapted to the cloud. So there's still a lot of digitization yet to happen. And when this digitization happens, you're at more risk, more exposure. And where's the skill gap? It is still lagging. So yeah, they're always under the watch and always in the shadows.
I mean, can I throw something out there? I mean, let's be honest. The reason that being CISO is so stressful is because the actual job title, designated scapegoat.
That is very true, right? We actually talked a little bit about this in the prep call. Think about the potential personal legal exposure that CISOs are now under because they're not covered as a director of an organization, so they don't fall under some of the director level insurance. Now it's personal. That adds a lot of personal stress on top of the day-to-day work job that you also have as a CISO.
Yeah, what's the incentive to even take the role now, right? I see a lot of people leaving. I've got a bunch of friends who are CISOs who are so relieved once they move from the public company space to a private. They said like huge amount of their job is just SEC paperwork.
You're absolutely right, Adrian. It was a fad a couple of years ago to get into a CISO role, but today it's no longer that. It's a lot of personal stress and a lot of liability when you take up as a CISO role, especially with a listed organization or an organization that's under heavy regulation. It is a lot of stress.
Like Adrian, I know a bunch of CISO friends that they have left. They are moving into virtual CISO roles because there's way less stress because they don't fall under the same requirements. They have more flexibility. It takes a ton of the kind of the personal strain off. And so what I'm seeing, which is interesting, is, you know, people that have been in the space for a long time as a CISO, they're exiting, they're going to be VCISOs. And now we have this really interesting gap of people that need to get backfilled. Now, some aren't backfilling, by the way. I mean, Ben and I have talked about this a lot on the show. You also see people not rehiring CISOs, which is interesting. But even if you wanted to, it's going to get harder and harder to find people that qualify because those guys have left and they're not coming back.
You're right. I kind of understood what you're talking, Matt. A lot of people go to the virtual CISO route because they can work on what interests them, the technical challenges, and they can work on multiple clients. And so they're always up to date on what's going on. And they're not liable and they don't have to do the routine reporting or the kind of compliance things that do. And the organizations have to do that on their own. And this is the best with the experience they have. They can work with maybe 10 customers, 10 different industries, 10 different verticals, and they'll have that knowledge that's up to date.
This argues that you should really have a chief information security officer and a chief compliance officer so that the InfoSec person doesn't have to handle stuff that's not really their bailiwick.
So one thing I always ask my customers is, there are two questions you have to answer. Am I compliant? Am I secure? If you say that you're compliant, doesn't mean you're secure. If you say you're secure, it doesn't mean you're compliant. So it's very two different things. And what Josh said is absolutely right. You need two people to head those two things. But in reality, that doesn't happen.
I hear a lot of CISOs complaining about, like you were saying, Matt, the role just keeps expanding. Mm-hmm. I think most people have seen the mind map that shows the responsibility of the CISO, and it's just this enormous cloud of different responsibilities. And it seems like every couple of months I hear about a new one. Like I know CISOs who are now getting fraud added to their list of responsibilities and
physical security,
the organization, like loss prevention, right? And then what else? AI security. So not even the will this AI model give up sensitive data, but will it tell our support bot tell a customer how to make napalm? Like the AI security of it, like that's a piece that hasn't really been under the CISO before, but now because it's part of AI, generative AI, it's just getting bundled in, and it's now yet another thing that CISOs have to worry about.
Look, let's be clear. Depending on the company, how to make napalm may be a feature. We don't know, but no. In all seriousness, I mean, they've added physical security, AI security, forward-thinking things or forward-looking pieces like quantum decryption. When will it hurt us? I've come to the conclusion that most of these are because executives read airline magazines and get scared at the articles.
Privacy as well.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So there are all these extra responsibilities for stress. So Ram, what should CISOs do to help them with some of the stress and not have it become a mental health crisis? Because I think, look, this role is going to be around for a while. People are going to be in that role. What advice would you give to a CISO on how to take some of that stress away? Help yourself from a mental perspective. Like what are those recommendations you would prescribe to?
Yeah. So first thing is have an open door always with your security teams. Security is a constant moving field, and everybody may not have the expertise. So allow them to express or do what they're good at, and what they're not good at, try to find a reliable partner and have external partners take over that. And not overburden the teams. It's very important that you shield that stress from your team, because if you put stress on them, they will not be able to function. Not just during a breach, even before a breach, a CISO has to respond to audits from, let's say, the finance needs some kind of an audit to submit, so they'll come for checking on them. And let's assume you're doing a company where you're involved with transactions with actual dollars. You'll have an external auditor coming out with the financial audit. Customers will have an audit coming on. Now, let's say you're a government agency, then you'll have DHS coming for an audit, or another agency. So you will be constantly going through audits or checks, and that's a never-ending stress for your team. So you have to make sure you rely on partners and rotate on these teams and ease it out on of them. So it's very important that you have partners that who can stand by you pre and post who are qualified. So that's something what I've seen a lot of CISOs practice, and that's when they have the confidence.
Now, when you say partners, you're not just talking managed security partners, you're talking potentially consulting partners, different types of partners that can fill in and provide expertise and help in different kind of specialized areas, right?
Absolutely, absolutely right.
Yeah, because we've seen we're going to cover this in the next segment. There's a lot of these articles starting to push people towards these MSPs. And it's interesting. We had Jeff Pollard on from Forrester about a month ago, and he talked about how people need to move away from their old legacy managed security providers because they're not providing any value, right? That you need to look at the new kind of detection response vendors that are providing value. So it's not just partner for the sake of a partner, it's a partner that can provide value and help you and your team be successful both pre and post. Now, post breach, I can imagine all the stress and things that have to happen, but you even talked about it from the pre post kind of area as
Yeah.
well.
So if you look at cybersecurity, it's three areas. One is before a breach happens. The next one is inline when a breach is happening at real time to you, and then the post part after the breach. So after the breach is, how do you come back online, make sure there's no downtime to your customers, your systems are back up, isolate that environment, all of that. Inline is how do we block stop. Pre is you're basically trying to see what are all my exposures, who are the partners who are good at these following areas. Let me take their advice because they know what's happening in the industry. What are the new tools? There are so many tools out there, at least a few thousand. You don't even know what to use and what to extract from them. So you need to rely on people who can adapt to that change and come and give you the best advice based on what's happening in the industry.
Adrian, what was the last count we counted? Like it was like 3,500 security vendors, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. And it's interesting hearing you describe it, break it into those three components. Ram, makes me, it's hard for me to believe that security leaders are still getting let go because a breach occurs, right? Like the head of loss prevention from Home Depot doesn't get fired every time somebody makes off with a toilet lid, right? Every time, every time there's theft from the store, like we expect bad things to happen, right? We prepare for those bad things. So I wonder if you think maybe that's something where we still need to communicate that. You're talking about below the CISO, making sure not to burn out your employees, but above the CISO, setting those expectations. Is that something we're still not doing as good a job of?
I think so. That's exactly what Josh said, right? CISO is nothing but you're getting a scapegoat ready. And that's something what we should take out and include them as a team player and maybe as an executive, not just as someone who's at a director level. They have a huge responsibility, so they should shoulder that with the organization, and the organization should look at them in the same way as they look at any other C-level executive.
So Ram, as a leader, as an executive leader, I always think about kind of who's going to replace me because at some point I'm leaving. Like I am. Like it's just if anybody who's watched my career, I leave. I go to the next thing, right? How important is it for CISOs to kind of cultivate who's going to take their place and what do they need to do to cultivate and get their like team ready to assume that role? Like if you think about it, right, we've talked about all the stresses, like how do you then mentor somebody on your team and prepare them for hopefully the eventual like replace me, I'm going elsewhere, or I didn't have a choice, breach, I got let go, who's going to fill those shoes, right? Like how should you approach that as a CISO and prepare your team?
It's like any other leader, Matt. There are so many functions. You have to make sure you enable all the team members to shoulder that specific responsibility, and you should recommend that they get a good leader. A leader is what is going to give the team the confidence, not technical expertise or anyone. Someone who can actually give confidence to the team that, hey, guys, you're free to do what you're good at, and let me take responsibility for what is going on. So that is what you should look for in a replacement.
Yeah, it's a fun little challenge. We also talked a little bit about the importance of networking. How important is it for CISOs to network with their peers? I think there's two potential kind of positive outcomes of networking.
Yeah, I see that happening with a lot of CISOs that I know, a lot of my customers. They network primarily. First thing is to exchange notes to see what's happening, what is it that they're seeing in their environment. They're very open about it and sharing it within that community. They have groups, they have meetups. The next thing is also, potential. If they feel that what the role they're doing is routine, they're not having enough challenge, they would like to move on as well. So I see a lot of active communities, a lot of people meeting up, and we sometimes house such meetings for CISOs also on and off site so that they can all just come together.
Yeah, I think understanding what your peers are facing, maybe best practices on how to address it is super important. Cyber Risk Alliance here has huge CISO networks primarily for that function, right? That they can collaborate and get together and talk about top issues, talk about how to solve those solutions, which is great in your day to day job. But then, in case something does happen, and you need to pick up the phone, at least there's a group of people out there that can hopefully provide you some guidance, and you never know, maybe your next job or your VCISO role.
And a good point on that, Matt, is that because they talk to each other, if a company is looking for a scapegoat, that's going to get around. Like they'll get away with that once, and then they're going to say, "Don't go over there." Like they're going to burn you.
Yeah. Creates almost like a little warning network as well. Like, yeah, don't go here.
It's a very small community. Everybody knows everybody. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, we interview a lot of them on the show, and you're right. It's a very tight knit community. I always say it. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon's nothing. I mean, if you're 2 degrees separated from anybody in the security space, you probably haven't been here very long.
Yeah, that's
Two
true.
degrees is about as it. Ram, any other recommendations or best practices you'd recommend for CISOs?
Best practices or recommendations is, like I said, it's not a one man show. They can't shoulder it all. They have to enable teams and they have to have partners who they trust and have them shoulder the responsibility equally. That's one thing what we've seen, and that's been very successful.
I've got a little bit of an off weird question. Rom, should there be CISOs?
I mean, you can.
Should CISOs be CISOs or should they only be directors? Since they're not, in most companies, they're not given the power to make the choices. Should they be C-levels? Or would it reduce their stress to be merely directors, offering choices to other people and not given the responsibility for managing them?
It's a very good question. I mean, you remove all the titles, right? But the role still exists. I would say the role still exists where they have to make sure that this function is done for an organization, whatever you call it. Yeah. So as long as the organization is cognizant that, hey, this is a role and this is the task, this is what we need to do for compliance and for security, we'll have that individual or that role or that department or that group fulfill that.
So
I'm going to disagree.
Josh, but I tend to agree with you a little bit on this one because we know that half of the Fortune 500 doesn't have a CISO.
Yeah.
They are director levels. I actually was sitting next to a corporate CFO a few months back in Boston at a bar. He owns the security responsibility. He just has a director reporting to him. They don't have a CISO. So it's interesting in that the question you ask is a very valid question because you're either going to provide the C-level executive with all the protections of other C-level executives. Otherwise, is it really a C-level role?
And if you don't have the authority to make the choice, if the sales group says, no, we're using this CRM or we're using this AI, and you've given them the choice of a low risk or a high risk, and they choose the high risk, but you're responsible if it goes bad, why would I take a C-level role?
Yeah.
That's not actually a C-level role. That's a director level role. Would that reduce the stress and the burnout rate if we acknowledge that honesty?
I guess to Ram's point, Ram, I'll let you kind of finish off on this one. As long as they it was narrow scoped enough, right? I think if I just own the security and then somebody else made the decision, fine. But if I own security and I own privacy and I own compliance and I own all these other things, I don't know if the stressors really go away. Do they, Ram?
if they're not responsible, stress goes away. If they set a certain rules, right, like what Josh just said, and if he doesn't have the power to enforce, he can just say, hey, this is what I recommended, and you folks are the decision makers. So if the decision is taken out, then the stress levels will not be there. The person who's going to take the decision is going to carry that stress.
All right, CFOs, here you go. They already have it anyways. At least public CFOs do, because they already have to put their name on the
Yeah.
303 and the 404, right?
Yes.
So they already have some of that stressor. Yeah. It's a very good topic. Ram, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you. Truly an honor. Thank you all.
We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.